There is a subtle war taking place within us, not between good and evil, but between impulse and awareness. Every day, without noticing, we surrender to reactions we never chose. Someone says something that stings, a situation doesn't go our way, or a memory resurfaces, and suddenly, we're consumed. We raise our voice, we shut down, we retaliate. But who is really reacting? Carl Jung believed that most of what we experience as ourselves is in fact a complex interplay of unconscious forces. We think we are in control, but often we are merely responding, like puppets pulled by unseen strings. Past wounds, suppressed emotions, unintegrated shadows. This video is not about becoming passive or emotionless. It is about the radical power of inner restraint, the kind of non-reaction that does not suppress, but transforms. We are going to explore what happens when, instead of reacting blindly, we choose to observe. When we resist the urge to lash out or defend ourselves, not out of weakness, but from a deeper strength. And in doing so, we begin to reclaim something essential. Our center. Imagine you're in a conversation and someone says something that hits a nerve. Maybe it's a passive-aggressive comment, a condescending tone, or an unfair accusation. Before you can even think, something stirs inside you. Your pulse quickens, your jaw tightens, and then you respond. Maybe you defend yourself, maybe you attack, or maybe you withdraw in cold silence. Either way, something took over. This is the trap, not the situation itself, but the instant reaction it triggers. We've all been there. That moment when your body moves before your mind has caught up, and later, sometimes minutes, sometimes years, you look back and wonder, why did I react like that? Where did that come from? What we rarely realize in these moments is that our reaction wasn't just about the present. It was about 1,000 unspoken stories behind our eyes. Old fears, past humiliations, invisible insecurities. We weren't responding to the person in front of us. We were reacting to the echoes of our own past. In psychological terms, this is reactivity, the automatic firing of emotion without reflection. It's instinctual, it's primal, and it's deeply human. But when left unchecked, it rules us. Carl Jung understood this well. He didn't see human behavior as random. For Jung, every emotional outburst, every irrational reaction was a sign that something unconscious had been activated, that the outer world had collided with an inner wound. This is why reactivity feels so intense. It's not just that something bad happened, it's that something buried got triggered. And when we're not aware of what's buried, we mistake the trigger for the truth. We think they made us feel this way. But really, they just touched a nerve that was already there. What would happen if we noticed that moment, that split second between trigger and response? What if, instead of reacting, we paused, not to suppress, but to listen? That moment of pause is the beginning of liberation. When we react, we believe we're defending ourselves. We imagine we're asserting power, drawing boundaries, standing up for our truth. But if we look closely, something far more troubling is happening beneath the surface. We are losing ourselves. In those moments of emotional reaction, we hand over our inner compass, our axis, as Jung might have described it, to the outer world. A careless word, a look, a tone of voice suddenly determines our emotional state. We are no longer guided from within. We become satellites spinning around someone else's gravity. Jung wrote that the pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. When we're reactive, We're not navigating between clarity and justice. We're caught in a chaotic swing between unconscious impulses. One moment, we're proud and righteous. The next, we're ashamed or regretful. The world outside has pressed a button inside, and we've been thrown off center. This loss of axis isn't just psychological, it's spiritual. To Jung, the self, the true center of the psyche, is not the ego, but a deeper, unifying principle. Reactivity severs our connection to that self. It draws us into the ego's drama, defense, projection, attack. We become trapped in a role we didn't consciously choose, in a scene we don't understand. And while reacting may feel powerful in the moment, its aftertaste is always bitter. There's regret, or emptiness, or a sense of being smaller than we were. We gave our power away, not to the other person, but to our own unconscious. We mistook movement for strength, noise for truth, reaction for clarity. The truth is, every time we react blindly, we fragment. We move away from wholeness. We create inner division between what we feel and what we are, between what we want to express and what we actually become. But the moment we see this, the moment we realize that reactivity costs us not just peace, but identity, we open the door to something else, inner sovereignty. When you lash out, withdraw, or speak with a bitterness that surprises even you, have you ever stopped to ask, who was that? Carl Jung would argue, it wasn't entirely you. It was a piece of you, an exiled part, long buried in the unconscious, a part he called the shadow. The shadow is everything within us that we have refused to see, traits we were taught to repress, emotions we labeled as bad or dangerous. As children, we quickly learned which parts of ourselves were unacceptable: anger, envy, pride, vulnerability, and we banished them, not out of malice, but for survival. We had to be good to be loved, and so we buried what didn't fit the mold. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It waits, and it reacts. When someone provokes you and you respond with an intensity that seems out of proportion, it is often the shadow breaking through. Not because it is evil, but because it is ignored. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The shadow reacts not because it wants to harm, but because it wants to be seen. And this is the painful irony. The parts of ourselves we try hardest to suppress are often the ones that end up controlling us the most. We think we are rational, composed, conscious. But the moment we are triggered, a hidden part leaps out, raw, defensive, sometimes cruel. We tell ourselves, that's not like me. But maybe it is us, just a part we haven't yet made peace with. In truth, the shadow holds immense psychological power. It carries emotional energy we've disowned, and when that energy is ignored, it erupts. But when it's integrated, it becomes a source of strength, creativity, and authenticity. To observe your reaction is the first step. To ask, who in me just reacted, is the second. The moment we pause and name the shadow, we stop being its puppet. We become its witness. And from there, something miraculous begins to happen. The shadow transforms. Because it was never the enemy. It was the part of you waiting to be welcomed home. Have you ever noticed how quickly we label others? How someone becomes toxic, selfish, manipulative, all in the span of a few seconds? Often, these judgments are more than observations. They are projections, unconscious parts of ourselves we disown, cast onto others like shadows on a wall. Carl Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But to do that, we must understand the mechanism of projection. It is the psychological act of attributing our own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or impulses to someone else. When we say, "he's arrogant," perhaps we're masking our own unacknowledged pride. When we accuse someone of being controlling, it may reflect our own fear of being powerless. Projection is not a conscious choice. It's a defense mechanism, the ego's way of avoiding the discomfort of facing the truth about itself. And yet, in doing so, the ego doesn't protect us. It possesses us. It distorts reality. We stop seeing people for who they are, and instead see them through the lens of our own unprocessed wounds. This is where emotional reactivity becomes dangerous. When a projection is triggered, it doesn't feel like our stuff. It feels real. It feels justified. And so, we react. Not to the actual person or event, but to a symbolic figure constructed by our psyche. The friend becomes the betraying father. The coworker becomes the shaming parent. The world becomes the battlefield of our inner conflict. Jung called this emotional takeover possession. It is when an unconscious complex hijacks the ego, like a ghost taking over a ship. We lose clarity. We speak words we later regret. We feel pulled by something larger than ourselves, something irrational, something ancient. But here lies the hidden opportunity. Every projection is a mirror. Every possession is a message. The person who triggers us is not our enemy. They are our teacher. They show us what remains unloved within. They point us toward our own shadow. To escape the trap, we must reverse the gaze. Instead of reacting outward, we turn inward. What part of me is being reflected here? What am I unwilling to own? When we do that, when we reclaim the parts we once cast away, the ego no longer needs to hijack reality. It can relax, it can see clearly, and in that clarity, we regain what we lost, our freedom. Between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl. This quote, often misattributed but deeply Jungian in spirit, captures a profound psychological truth. Awareness is not just a luxury, it is a form of liberation. Every moment we are alive, stimuli enter our consciousness. A glance, a tone, a delay in a text message. Life constantly taps us on the shoulder, sometimes gently, sometimes with force, and most of us respond not with conscious thought, but with reflex, immediate, automatic, conditioned. We don't usually live in the space between. We skip it. We go from stimulus to reaction as if nothing else is possible. But something is possible. The space, however small, where the unconscious becomes visible and the conscious takes hold. Carl Jung devoted his life to expanding that space. He believed that human suffering often stems from a lack of inner observation. When we are unaware of our complexes, our traumas, and our internal conflicts, they dominate us. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he warned, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But when we develop the capacity to pause, even for a single breath, we interrupt that fate. We stand at the threshold of transformation. Because it's in that pause that we become aware of our choices. We can ask, what am I really feeling? What story am I believing? What part of me is being threatened? This act of inner questioning doesn't erase the emotion, but it contains it. It holds it in a vessel of awareness. And that is what changes everything. Because in that space, we can respond instead of react. We can act from the self, the deeper, centered aspect of the psyche, rather than from wounded fragments or defensive patterns. To cultivate this space is to reclaim authorship over our lives. It is to stop living as a character in someone else's script and begin to write our own. It's the moment when we say, I see what's happening, and I choose how to respond. That choice is where our growth begins. It is the seed of freedom. When we are emotionally triggered, our first instinct is to discharge the tension outward toward others or inward against ourselves. But Carl Jung proposed a radically different approach. Don't suppress it. Don't act it out. Dialogue with it. This is the essence of active imagination, one of Jung's most powerful and misunderstood techniques. It is a method for engaging the unconscious, not by denying emotion or overanalyzing it, but by entering into a living relationship with it. When we feel a strong reaction, Jung suggests, we should not escape it. We should talk to it. Imagine sitting down, closing your eyes, and allowing the emotion that overwhelmed you to take shape. Perhaps anger appears as a figure. Perhaps fear takes the form of a child. Whatever arises, you don't judge, you observe. And then you ask, who are you? Why are you here? What do you want me to know? This is not fantasy. It is psychological alchemy. Active imagination allows us to move from reactivity to reflection, from being hijacked by emotion to engaging it with depth and curiosity. It is the art of turning raw, chaotic energy into meaning. In doing so, we transform our pain into insight and our triggers into teachers. The purpose is not to resolve everything in one sitting. The goal is relationship. Jung believed that the unconscious is not a void, but a dialogue partner. Our reactions, then, are not intrusions. They are invitations. They call us inward. They ask us to witness the inner life we have neglected. And here's the paradox. The more we enter into this inner conversation, the less we are dominated by it. The more we give space to our emotions in imagination, the less they need to erupt in life. We become less reactive not by becoming numb, but by becoming intimately familiar with the forces moving within us. In active imagination, silence becomes communication, stillness becomes action, and reaction becomes reflection. A sacred act of inner listening. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is pause and begin to imagine. In a culture that celebrates immediacy, instant opinions, instant reactions, instant validation, restraint is often mistaken for weakness. But Carl Jung would argue the opposite. Restraint is not the absence of power. It is the mark of someone who has integrated it. This is the path of individuation, Jung's term for the process of becoming whole. It is not about becoming perfect or passive or unemotional. It is about becoming conscious, about recognizing the many selves within us and learning how to hold their tensions without being ruled by them. When you are provoked and choose not to react, not because you're suppressing your truth, but because you're listening for a deeper truth, you are engaging in individuation. You are stepping out of the conditioned patterns of the ego and into alignment with the self, the deeper, wiser center of the psyche. Restraint, in this context, is not repression. It is a conscious act, a refusal to be enslaved by habit or fear. It is the strength to carry an emotion long enough to understand it, to sit with it, to feel it, and to allow it to inform you without hijacking you. Jung observed that the modern person suffers from a loss of connection to the symbolic life. We want to fix, escape, or express everything immediately. But individuation invites us into a different rhythm, a slower, deeper rhythm that values inner dialogue over outer reaction. When we restrain ourselves from reacting impulsively, we create space for meaning. We allow the psyche to do its work, Emotions that would have erupted into destruction can now ripen into insight. Wounds that once drove us to lash out can now lead us inward toward healing. This kind of restraint is not easy. It requires tremendous inner discipline and a commitment to self-knowledge. But it is also liberating, because it means we are no longer puppets of our pain. We are not actors in a play written by trauma. We are becoming the authors of our lives. To hold back is not to be weak. To hold back is to hold space for truth, for growth, for something sacred to emerge. In an age where noise is mistaken for truth and reaction is confused with relevance, silence can seem like surrender. But Carl Jung would urge us to look deeper. Silence, the inner kind, is not passivity. It is power under control. It is the highest expression of inner mastery. To be silent does not mean to be without feeling. On the contrary, it means we are feeling everything, but no longer enslaved by it. When you choose not to react, you are not avoiding life. You are engaging it on a more profound level. You are refusing to be dragged into patterns that diminish your being. This is psychological alchemy, the transformation of instinct into awareness, of emotion into meaning. Non-reaction, when conscious, is not emptiness. It is containment. It is the vessel that allows raw emotion to ferment into insight. Jung saw this as a crucial part of individuation. He wrote, "The ability to stand still and endure conflict is a sign of inner strength." In the silence of non-reaction, we are not escaping conflict. We are enduring it within, allowing it to evolve into something larger than the ego's desire for vindication. There is a kind of dignity in silence, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself, the kind that sees through the drama of the moment and waits for a deeper truth to unfold. This silence is not a lack of words, but the presence of soul. It's the quiet that comes when you no longer need to defend yourself, not because you are indifferent, but because you are grounded in something that cannot be shaken by passing insults or praise. This is what it means to regain control. Not to dominate others, not to manipulate appearances, but to return to your axis, to hold fast to the still point within you that no external event can disturb. And perhaps the greatest strength is this: the ability to witness the storm without becoming it. In the labyrinth of the human psyche, not all reactions are random. Sometimes, the intensity of our emotion points to something hidden: a core wound, a forgotten memory, a psychic fragment still alive in the dark. Carl Jung called these inner landmines complexes. A complex, in Jungian psychology, is not just a set of ideas or feelings. It is an autonomous psychic structure, a living cluster of emotion, memory, and narrative that functions like a mini personality within the psyche. And when triggered, it acts as if it were you. It speaks with your voice. It feels like your truth. But it is not the whole of you. Jung discovered that these complexes behave like splintered selves. You might be calm, rational, composed, until someone says something that touches a nerve. Suddenly the tone of your voice changes. Your face hardens. You say something cruel, defensive, or irrational. And afterward you wonder, what just happened to me? That was the complex, activated. This is why self-control is so difficult. It's not just about resisting temptation or counting to 10. It's about recognizing that, in the moment of reactivity, you may not be fully yourself. You may be under the influence of a part of you that you haven't yet made conscious. But here's the insight that changes everything. Complexes are not enemies. They are messages. Each complex is like a flare from the unconscious, signaling where the psyche is wounded and where healing is needed. If we can learn to observe these moments instead of acting them out, we gain access to a deeper layer of the soul. We begin to track patterns. We learn our psychic map, and we start to see, this isn't about them. This is an old story still asking to be heard. To reclaim control, then, is not to destroy the complex. It is to relate to it, to speak to it, to understand what it's protecting and what it's trying to say. This is the deeper work, not the suppression of emotion, but the integration of fragmented selves. When we meet our complexes with awareness instead of fear, reaction dissolves. What remains is insight, and from insight, power is born. Because the more you understand your internal architecture, the less anyone outside can shake it. We often associate non-reaction with submission, as if to withhold a response is to lose power. But Carl Jung invites us to see it differently. Non-reaction, when conscious and intentional, is not weakness. It is the mark of someone who has awakened the inner warrior, the archetype of strength, clarity, and self-mastery. The warrior, in its deepest symbolic form, is not the one who fights every battle. It is the one who chooses which battles are worthy of its sword. It does not flinch at every insult. It does not react to every provocation. Its power lies not in force, but in discipline, not in domination, but in alignment with a higher order within. In Jungian psychology, archetypes are fundamental patterns of the human psyche, ancient images and energies that live within all of us. The inner warrior is one such energy. When disowned, it can emerge in distorted ways: aggression, emotional coldness, or need for control. But when integrated, it becomes the part of us that protects our boundaries without losing our center. To reclaim the inner warrior is to reclaim the right to stand in stillness while others rage. It is to respond with precision instead of noise. It is to feel the heat of emotion rise and choose not to be consumed by it. This is not passivity. It is presence. Fierce, calm, unshakable presence. Think of the samurai, the stoic philosopher, the quiet leader. Their strength does not lie in their ability to strike, but in their ability to wait, to hold tension, to act with purpose. Jung would say these figures have touched the self, the deepest center of the psyche, and now serve it rather than the ego's reactive impulses. When you embody the inner warrior, you no longer seek to win every argument or prove every point. You are no longer baited by drama or praise. You become strategic with your energy, selective with your words. You protect your inner space like sacred ground. And when others sense this, they don't feel threatened. They feel respect. Because true power doesn't need to shout. It is known by its silence, felt in its restraint, and revealed in its rare and intentional action. There is a point within you, a still point, that does not tremble when criticized, does not swell when praised, and does not flinch in the face of chaos. It is not the ego. It is not your personality. It is what both the Stoics and Carl Jung called the witness, the center of consciousness that observes without judgment and endures without being broken. For the Stoics, this inner witness was cultivated through discipline and philosophy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." It is a vision of power that begins not in domination of the world, but in alignment with one's own nature. Jung echoed this in a different register. He saw the ego, our conscious self, as a small island in the vast sea of the unconscious. And yet, within that sea, there is a center, the self. When we access it, we do not become indifferent. We become whole. We see more clearly, feel more deeply, and respond more wisely. Non-reaction is the practice of returning to this center, not once, but again and again. It is the daily choice to live from the witness rather than the wound, from presence rather than impulse. This does not mean we suppress what we feel. It means we learn to carry it differently. We observe the anger, the fear, the desire to lash out, and we listen. We allow it to pass through, like a storm moving across the sky. And when the sky clears, we speak or act or choose silence, but now from clarity, not chaos. This is what both Stoicism and depth psychology point to, that maturity is not about having no emotion, but about cultivating the still mind that can hold it all without collapse, a mind that reflects instead of reacts, a soul that waits before it speaks, a presence that shapes reality simply by refusing to be shaped by it. And when you begin to live from this place, not occasionally, but consistently, something changes in you. You are no longer the echo of the world. You become the tuning fork that calms its noise. Because the one who can remain still in the face of the storm becomes the storm's end. We live in a world that worships speed, reaction, and noise, where silence is mistaken for weakness and restraint is seen as submission. But as Carl Jung showed us, the true journey of the soul is not outward, it is inward, toward wholeness, toward the self, toward the silent witness within, who watches without judgment and chooses without fear. When you don't react, you're not running away. You are stepping back into yourself. You are refusing to let someone else write your story. You are reclaiming the sacred space between stimulus and response. And within that space lies everything the modern world forgets: strength, clarity, and freedom. This is not the path of the passive. It is the path of the awakened, the one who feels fully, yet is not consumed, the one who suffers deeply, yet is not destroyed, the one who, in choosing silence, becomes the loudest voice in the room, not by volume, but by presence, because the greatest power is not to control others, but to govern yourself. So next time you're triggered, pause, breathe. Ask not, how do I win? But, who in me just reacted? Ask not, what do they deserve? But what part of me is being invited to heal? And in that moment, you'll begin to see. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a mirror. It wasn't an insult. It was a call to deepen, to grow, to return to your axis. Because when you stop reacting, you don't become less human. You become more of who you truly are.